Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we cut through the noise and get straight to what matters. In today's pretty overwhelming information landscape, truly understanding your digital assets can feel like navigating a dense fog. How do you actually get a handle on what software you own, what's being used, and maybe what's just silently draining your budget?
Yeah, that's really the heart of our deep dive today. We're tackling a critical area for many organizations. Software Asset Management, or SAM. Specifically, we're looking at it within ServiceNow SAM Pro. Our guide here is a really foundational ServiceNow white paper. It's called Fixing the GIPS, a SAM Manager's Guide. And it's basically a roadmap for pinpointing and resolving those common blind spots, the ones that trip up even really experienced SAM teams.
Right. So our mission for you listening is pretty straightforward. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a clear, actionable understanding of how to ensure accurate license compliance and, importantly, how to truly optimize software usage. Imagine the confidence you'll feel when those publisher audits inevitably arrive.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating, what you mentioned, is that most of these often frustrating issues, despite sounding complex, they often boil down to just 5 common data objects in what the paper calls the SAM universe.
That's right. Those 5 core areas.
So let's unpack this then. When SAM managers are using ServiceNow SAM Pro, what are the most common frustrations they hit? The things that lead to incorrect license compliance. Where do things usually go sideways?
Well, it often comes down to fundamental data quality or maybe configuration. The white paper really helps by categorizing these into data issues and configuration issues, which is honestly crucial for finding the right fix.
Okay, data versus config. Makes sense.
Yeah. So, for example, a really frequent complaint is something like, I have SQL Server installations, but no license consumption is happening. Often that's a configuration issue. The system just isn't configured correctly to see those installs in a way that lets them be licensed.
Okay. So the software's definitely there. It's just not registering for licensing.
Yeah.
It's like having a ticket to an event, but the scanner at the door doesn't recognize it.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. Or you might hear, why are my Microsoft Windows Server installs on the dev environment not being consumed by my Visual Studio entitlement?
Right.
Again, that points to a configuration issue. Maybe the product install condition for Visual Studio wasn't set up right to cover those dev environments. Another big one is the huge discrepancy between my Adobe Portal subscriptions and what ServiceNow is showing. This often stems from SAM teams incorrectly creating allocations for subscription software, which, isn't necessary and just messes with the numbers.
Okay, so trying to allocate SaaS stuff when you shouldn't.
Exactly. And then sometimes it's purely a data issue. Like, I have an entitlement for Windows Server Standard, but none of my actual Windows Server installs are being licensed. This usually means something critical, like the Windows Server Edition simply wasn't discovered or recorded correctly in the first place.
That makes a lot of sense. It really sounds like a lot of these problems start with that foundational data or the initial setup. But it's not all just about uncovering problems, right? You mentioned ServiceNow has built-in tools to help teams proactively identify and fix these issues right there in the SAM workspace.
Absolutely. Yeah, they've provided some excellent in-product support. First, there's the SAM Health Check. You can think of this as a proactive diagnostic tool. It's actually a ServiceNow store application, and it offers these codified best practice checks. They're specifically designed for licensing requirements. So you can run these checks, pinpoint issues, and even create tasks right there to get them resolved. And what's really powerful is that these checks are actively maintained by the ServiceNow product team, so you're always getting the most up-to-date guidance.
So it's like having a constantly updated checklist of best practices built right into your system. That sounds incredibly valuable for staying compliant. What's the second area of support you mentioned?
The second feature is called Installs Requiring Action. This is a key performance indicator, a KPI, and it's displayed pretty prominently right on your license usage dashboard. And it lists out problematic software installations, provides clear reasons why they're issues, and offers resolution details for specific configuration items or CIs. So both the SAM Health Check and this Installs Requiring Action KPI, they're easily accessible from the license usage view. Makes it much easier for SAM teams to quickly identify and correct both data and configuration issues.
Okay, good. So help is built in. Let's dive into the core now. We mentioned at the top that most issues boil down to those 5 common data objects in the SAM universe. The white paper kind of frames this like a self-audit process. So as you embark on your SAM self-audit, where do we start? Maybe with the digital front door. SaaS subscriptions. What exactly are these, and where do the most common pitfalls lie?
Right, SaaS subscriptions. These are essentially the digital records of your cloud software licenses. They get pulled directly from portals like Microsoft 365, Adobe, Zoom, the one ServiceNow SAMPro integrates with. The platform automates this data pull, which is great, but that's also where the first set of challenges can pop up.
Okay, so
Yep.
what are maybe the top 2 or 3 data issues that you see crop up with these subscriptions?
Well, the big ones we often see are things like unrecognized subscription identifiers and also unresolved user resolution. Both of those can significantly skew your compliance and your optimization efforts.
Let's unpack unrecognized subscription identifiers first.
Right.
What does that actually mean, and why is it such a problem?
Yeah, think of an unrecognized subscription identifier as like a crucial translation error. It's a technical reference, could be a SKU or a service plan ID that ServiceNow pulls from the SaaS portal. The system uses these identifiers to automatically map to the correct software model, right? But if it doesn't recognize the identifier, that mapping just breaks down. So, for instance, maybe Visio Client comes in. That should map to Microsoft Visio Plan 2. But if it's unrecognized, your Visio licenses won't be correctly counted. And this isn't just some technical glitch, it's really a fundamental breakdown. Your data can't speak the same language as your licenses, which, can lead to compliance gaps or missed optimization opportunities.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, if your system can't translate, it basically can't count properly. So how do you fix that?
Well, the primary fix is usually to update ServiceNow content. This happens weekly as new normalization rules get added. You can also enable content services. This lets you send this unmapped data to ServiceNow, and they might map it in a future update. But for a quicker resolution, you can often manually map that specific identifier to an existing software model yourself.
Got it. Okay. What about the other big one you mentioned, unresolved users? Why is matching those users from the SaaS portal to your sysuser table in ServiceNow so important?
Oh, it's absolutely critical, both for accurate license compliance and for getting real optimization recommendations. See, if ServiceNow can't match a user from, say, the Adobe portal to a user record in your own sysuser table,
All right.
it can't tell if that licensed user is actually active, maybe if they've left the organization, or if they're even a human user at all. Could be a service account.
Right.
And this auto resolution can fail for several reasons. Maybe the license is assigned to a non-human thing, like a shared mailbox. Or maybe your user data isn't correctly synced from Active Directory. Or perhaps the out-of-the-box matching rules just aren't quite right for your specific environment.
So if a user isn't properly resolved, it's basically a blind spot for compliance and for potential savings. How do you tackle that one?
Well, first you need to verify, is this user human or non-human? Then check if their details exist and are up to date in your sysuser table. If not, you need to resolve those underlying sync issues, maybe with your AD team. And if the data is there, but it's just not matching automatically, you'll probably need to configure specific user resolution rules in ServiceNow to help bridge that gap.
Yeah.
This makes sure you're not paying for licenses for, ghost users or non-human entities that don't actually need them.
Okay. And on the optimization side of SaaS, you mentioned missing last activity. What does that data tell you? Is that also compliance related?
Good question. No, this one is purely for optimization, not direct license compliance. Last activity data helps ServiceNow identify low usage or maybe no usage at all, which is key for recommending reclamation candidates, basically. Licenses you could potentially get back or maybe downgrade.
Okay, so finding savings.
Exactly. Now, while platforms like Microsoft 365 often provide this automatically for products like Exchange Online or Teams, others, like Adobe Creative Cloud, might actually require specific discovery solutions to pull that usage data in. It's also important to remember, though, that some products like CrowdStrike and DocuSign, they just don't support last activity determination through their APIs at all right now.
Good to know.
And one more thing on optimization. You'll want to review your reclamation rule thresholds. ServiceNow usually auto-creates these with defaults, maybe like 3 days before reclamation notification and a 30 days last activity threshold. You should definitely review those and adjust them to fit your organization's specific policies and expectations.
All right, that's super helpful for sad ham. Let's shift gears now to the next crucial piece in our SAM audit puzzle. Software inventory. That sounds like, well, the bedrock of everything, right?
It truly is, yeah. Accurate software inventory in your ServiceNow CMDB It's the absolute foundation for SAM Pro to deliver correct license compliance. The white paper highlights 3 really crucial pillars for the CMDB and SAM Pro that directly impact licensing.
Okay, what are they?
First is the discovery of the software installation record itself. The basics: software name, publisher, product, version, and critically, the edition. This is vital because, without accurate identification, you can't even begin to think about licensing it correctly.
Makes perfect sense. Can't manage what you can't identify. What's the second pillar?
That's the discovery of key information about where the software is installed, the installed on CI. This includes technical details like CPU core count, CPU count, thread count, the operating system. This data is absolutely critical for those licensing models based on per core or per processor metrics, especially common with server software. Without it, you're pretty much flying blind on your server license compliance.
Right, those complex server metrics. And the third pillar, this one sounds like it connects more to your overall infrastructure.
It does, yeah. The third pillar is the discovery of the underlying infrastructure where that installed software is actually deployed. Think about applications like Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle Database Server. They can live on premises, maybe in complex clusters or across various cloud platforms like AWS or Azure. Each of these deployment environments can have different licensing implications. So accurately discovering this deployed infrastructure and its relationships within the CMDB is incredibly important, especially for complex data center server software. Ignoring this, well, that's a fast track to potential audit issues.
Definitely sounds critical. So with those foundational pillars in mind, let's tackle a couple of the most common issues that pop up with software inventory data. What happens when installations are missing key attributes, like maybe the discovered version, or more often, the edition?
Yeah, this is a huge pain point because if you don't know the exact version or especially the edition, you just can't accurately license it. Imagine trying to license Microsoft Office without knowing if it's Standard, Pro Plus, or Enterprise E3. Big difference. So if these attributes are missing, the first step is always to work with your discovery admin. Can we get them discovered? If discovery isn't possible for something specific, like edition, maybe the tool just doesn't pick it up. You can use the edition override feature in ServiceNow and manually add it to the discovery model. It's a necessary workaround sometimes, just to ensure proper licensing calculation happens.
Okay, manual override is a backup. What about software that's installed on a stale or retired CI, but is still consuming a license? That just screams inefficiency and bad data hygiene.
Oh, it's a classic. It's a classic example of maybe CMDB best practices not being followed, and it directly hits your license consumption figures. Wasted spend. It typically happens in a couple of ways. Either a configuration item, CI, is marked as retired in the CMDB, but somehow it's still being discovered out on the network.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe the CI is just stale, meaning it hasn't been discovered in, say, over 90 days. That's often the default. But it's still sitting there active and counting against your licenses. The takeaway here is really crucial. Make sure your retirement processes are robust. Ensure CIs are properly decommissioned and that they stop being discovered. Otherwise, you're literally paying for software licenses on ghost assets, software that's no longer in use or simply shouldn't be there.
That's a powerful incentive to keep that CMDB clean, definitely. And what if an installation is missing environment information? Like you don't know if it's production or development or test.
This is kind of a silent compliance risk.
Yeah.
Many publishers, Microsoft is a big one, have specific licensing rules tied directly to the environment. For instance, you might license Microsoft SQL Server differently in a production environment compared to a development one. Or maybe Visual Studio Entitlements only covered development use.
Right, like MSDN licenses.
Exactly. So if your CIs aren't tagged correctly with their environment, prod, dev, test, UAT, whatever you use, ServiceNow can't automatically apply those nuanced publisher-specific rules, and that leaves you potentially vulnerable in an audit.
Yeah.
It's really essential to work with your CMDB manager or owners to ensure this data is consistently populated and accurate.
Okay, that covers a lot on inventory. Super important stuff. Let's move on now to the third critical data object in our audit. Review installs normalization. What exactly is software normalization, and why should SAM managers care about it so much?
Yeah, normalization. Think of it as your software's identity verification system. It's about consistency. It takes all the messy, inconsistent ways software might show up when it's discovered. You might find MS Word, Microsoft Word V2020, Word Pro, all sorts of variations. And it consistently translates them into a single recognized standard entry, like Microsoft Word 2020 Professional Plus. So the process compares the discovered publisher, product, version, and edition values against ServiceNow's huge and ever-growing repository of normalized equivalents. And this consistency is just non-negotiable if you want accurate licensing calculations down the line.
Okay.
What's truly helpful here is that ServiceNow Content Services continuously add new normalization rules, usually every week, and that helps automate this process significantly.
So it's really about cleaning up that messy discovered data to make it reliable and usable for licensing. Makes sense. How do you assess if it's actually working correctly? What about installs that are fully normalized? Are they just good to go?
Fully normalized installs are definitely great news. They're strong candidates for the license compliance calculation engine. However, even with those, it's still crucial to do a quick check. Was the software edition also discovered and normalized correctly? If it wasn't, and maybe your discovery solution just doesn't support discovering the edition for that particular software, well, you might need to manually update that edition override field on the discovery model, like we talked about with inventory. It's a small step, but can make a really big difference, especially for server products where edition is key.
Got it. Check the edition even if it says fully normalized. What if installs are only partially normalized or maybe not normalized at all? This sounds like where the real work begins.
It is, yeah. If installs are only partially normalized, maybe just the publisher matched or not normalized at all, it means ServiceNow couldn't automatically make a full confident match against its library. For these, you have a couple of primary routes you can take. One option is to opt in to Content Services. This allows ServiceNow to securely share the unnormalized data, and their content team might research it and include a rule for it in a future weekly update, potentially auto-normalizing it for you later.
Okay.
Or for a quicker fix, you can perform manual normalization directly within the ServiceNow platform. You'll see suggestions, and you can accept or reject them or map it yourself. Now, if it's something truly unique, maybe some homegrown software your company developed,
Right.
you might need to create a custom product definition first, and then manually normalize your discovered installs to that custom product, or even create pattern normalization rules. But the end goal is always the same. Get those installs to that fully normalized state for reliable compliance calculation.
Okay, makes sense. Manual effort needed for the exceptions. All right, so we've identified the software, we've normalized its identity. Now, the big question, how do we prove we actually own the rights to use it? Let's transition to the fourth core object, review of software entitlements. What exactly are these, and why are they so foundational to the whole process?
Right. Software entitlements. These are basically your digital purchase records, your proof of purchase for the software licenses. They are the absolutely critical foundational data point for calculating your true license compliance position. Can't stress that enough. Fundamentally, your entitlement data, what you bought, gets reconciled against your actual software installations, what you're using ServiceNow SAM Pro's built-in licensing rules engine. And that reconciliation determines whether you're compliant or maybe under-licensed or even over-licensed. So without accurate, complete entitlement records, all the discovery and normalization in the world won't tell you if you actually own what you're running.
That makes perfect sense. You need both sides of the equation, what you have and what you own. So, what are the top issues that typically pop up with these crucial purchase records? Let's start with the one you mentioned, entitlements without a PPN, a publisher part number. Why is that such a big deal?
Oh, it's a huge one. And honestly, it's a common oversight, especially when people are manually entering entitlement data. It's considered best practice to always use the publisher part number, the PPN, when you're adding entitlements into ServiceNow. Why? Because ServiceNow Content Services use that PPN to automatically enrich your entitlement data with tons of crucial information. Things like the correct license metric, your downgrade rights, the appropriate software model to link it to, maybe even end of life or end of support dates. It does a lot of the heavy lifting. So if the PPN exists in the ServiceNow SAM library, but it just wasn't used when the entitlement was created, you should really go back and manually add it. If the PPN isn't in ServiceNow's library yet, you can actually inform ServiceNow, raise a case so they can research it and add it. Or in the meantime, you can create a custom PPN, which can later receive PPN suggestions from the system if a match is found. But bottom line, without the PPN, you're missing out on vital automation and data enrichment, which means more manual work and higher risk of errors.
Okay, so PPN is key for automation and accuracy. Makes sense. What about expiring entitlements? This feels like a constant treadmill for SAM managers trying to keep up with renewals.
It absolutely is, yeah. Entitlements that are type subscription or type maintenance must be kept current through renewals. If they expire, and you don't record the renewal, they immediately lead to incorrect license compliance figures in ServiceNow. For instance, think about Microsoft Software Assurance, SA, on your SQL Server licenses. If you don't renew that SA entitlement and record it, you might lose valuable benefits like license mobility or new version rights, and suddenly your calculated compliance status could change dramatically, showing you as non-compliant. Thankfully, you can easily track upcoming expirations on the maintenance expiration chart, which is usually right there on your SAM overview dashboard. It's incredibly helpful for proactive management, preventing those nasty surprises.
I can definitely imagine the audit headache if those aren't tracked properly. What's the problem if a maintenance entitlement is missing its base license? You mentioned this earlier. It sounds like just waste.
It is, basically, yeah. Maintenance entitlements, like Microsoft SA or similar support contracts from other vendors, must be related to a base entitlement, usually a perpetual license to function correctly. They add benefits to that base license. If they're not linked correctly in ServiceNow, that maintenance entitlement typically won't be consumed during reconciliation. It just sits there, which leads to pure license wastage. You're paying for a benefit like upgrade rights or support that your system doesn't even recognize you can apply.
Wow. Okay.
So you need to ensure your base perpetual entitlements are correctly linked to their corresponding maintenance entitlements. And it's also good practice to periodically check for any broken maintenance coverage, maybe like a gap in software assurance coverage between renewal periods, which can also cause compliance issues.
Got it. Keep those links solid. And finally, under entitlements, what happens if you have an incorrect license metric assigned?
This is another critical one. While using PPNs usually auto-populates the correct license metric, manual review is absolutely vital if a PPN wasn't used, or maybe if you just suspect an error. The license metric, things like per core, per user, per device, processor value unit, ensures the correct licensing model is applied according to the specific publisher terms. If that metric is wrong on your entitlement record, your compliance calculations will be fundamentally off. Massively, potentially.
Give me an example.
Sure. Like Oracle Database Enterprise Edition, it can typically only be licensed by per processor, using Oracle's core factor table, or per named user plus. Oh. If your entitlement record in ServiceNow somehow got set to, say, per device, you've got a major problem on your hands. The calculation will be completely wrong. Luckily, ServiceNow's SAM Health Check tool, which we mentioned earlier, includes checks that can help verify if the right license metric seems to be selected for common products, helping you catch and avoid those costly miscalculations.
Okay, very important to double check that metric. All right, so we've identified the software, we've normalized its identity, we've tied it to our purchase records via entitlements. Now we need to define how that software is actually licensed the rules of the game. This brings us to the fifth and final core data object in our self-audit. Review of software models. ServiceNow describes these as the most configurable and adaptable part of SAM Pro. However, due to their flexibility, it requires diligent, ongoing maintenance. What exactly is a software model?
Yeah, that description hits the nail on the head. A software model is essentially the blueprint, or you could say the profile, of the software license rights you've purchased. It includes crucial information like the publisher, the product, maybe version constraints, and critically, it links to a discovery map, or DMP, which helps connect it to discovered software. Your software entitlements then use this model to understand the specific rights and terms you've acquired, like downgrade rights or maybe suite components. It brings it all together. And an important rule of thumb here, really, you should generally only focus on reviewing software models that are actually linked to active entitlements. Otherwise, you might just be looking at unused clutter in the system.
Okay, so it's the rulebook for licensing that links the entitlement to the real world. Got it.
Yeah.
What are some of the key issues that tend to arise with software models? Let's start with software models with inactive DMAs or discovery maps. What's the problem there?
Right, DMAPs. These are really important because they're updated regularly by ServiceNow's content services. They provide the latest content-related things like downgrade paths, which versions can be covered by a newer license, or which individual products are part of a software suite, and even inference percentages for suites. So if your software models are linked to inactive DMAs, you're essentially not leveraging the most up-to-date authorized ServiceNow content for those calculations, and that can definitely lead to compliance errors or missed optimization.
So how do you avoid that?
Well, the best practice is always to ensure your entitlements are linked to software models that use active DMPs. And the easiest way to do that, going back to entitlements, is by selecting a PPN when you create the entitlement. That usually auto-creates the correct model with the right active DMAP and enriches all that vital data for you. Now, if a PPN isn't available and you have to create a model manually, you must ensure all that enrichment information, like downgrade rights, sweet components, is properly populated yourself to avoid compliance gaps. It's more work, higher risk.
Okay, so again, PPN helps ensure your rulebook is current. What's the issue with software models having version and edition set to anything? That sounds like it could lead to really broad, maybe inaccurate licensing.
Yeah, for most server products, it's generally not advisable, as the white paper puts it, to link your entitlements to software models where the edition or maybe even the version is set to anything. Why? Because, as we've discussed, the specific edition is absolutely crucial for accurate license compliance of most server software. Think Microsoft's SQL Server Standard versus Enterprise, licensed very, very differently.
Right, huge cost difference too.
Exactly. If your model says anything edition, it might incorrectly consume licenses against installs it shouldn't. However, it's important to note, there are specific, somewhat rare scenarios where having anything is actually by design and correct.
Like what?
Things like client access licenses, CALs, they often don't specify a version or edition. Or certain types of Microsoft P plus SA, perpetual plus software assurance entitlements, or sometimes SA-only entitlements. For those, the models might be intentionally version and edition agnostic. And for Oracle products, the guidance is often that software models should have edition-only, no version requirement. So there are nuances. But if your situation doesn't fall into one of these very specific exceptions, you really need to ensure your entitlements are linked to models with correctly populated edition fields, ideally driven by those PPNs. It's a pretty common audit flag if this is misconfigured for standard server products.
Okay, so anything is usually bad for servers, unless it's a specific known exception. Got it. That makes sense. Edition matters a lot. Finally, what about software models created automatically through a system property? That sounds convenient on the surface, so why is it listed as a potential pitfall?
Right. It sounds convenient, doesn't it? There's a system property in ServiceNow that can automatically create a basic software model if an entitlement is created and a matching model doesn't exist. However, the white paper advises this feature should be used with, let's say, extreme caution, and ideally only by truly mature customers who understand exactly what it's doing and why they need it. Its intent is noble, to help quickly identify maybe why certain products are showing as non-compliant due to simply missing a software model. But in practice, what often happens is it leads to just a high number of unused software models cluttering up the system. Basic, potentially inaccurate models get created automatically. So the recommended best practice is actually to delete such auto-created models, switch off that system property entirely, and then manually create entitlements and their corresponding accurate software models only for those installed that genuinely require licensing action. If you do feel you need to use it, the advice is employ it for a very limited time, maybe to catch some initial gaps, then switch it off immediately and carefully verify every single model it created. Otherwise, you're just adding to your data debt and potential confusion down the line.
Wow. Okay, so convenience can lead to clutter and inaccuracy there. Good warning. That truly was a comprehensive deep dive. I feel like you now have a really clear, actionable roadmap for tackling some of the most persistent challenges in software asset management, specifically using ServiceNow SAM Pro. By diligently managing these 5 core data objects we walked through, your SaaS subscriptions, your software inventory, the installs normalization process, your software entitlements, and finally those critical software models, you really can ensure accurate compliance, optimize your software usage, and hopefully face those publisher audits with genuine confidence. It feels like a detailed blueprint for turning what can be a chaotic landscape into a much clearer, more controlled environment.
That's absolutely right. It's about bringing structure and accuracy to those key areas. And maybe just to leave you with a final thought, something to consider in your own context. Given the rapid pace of change, especially in cloud services and publisher licensing models these days, what's maybe one current blind spot in your own SAM process? Which one of these 5 areas, if you addressed it using some of these detailed insights, could yield the most significant gains for you, either in compliance confidence or maybe in actual cost savings? Which of these 5 areas is causing you the most headaches right now? It's worth asking that question.
That's a really powerful question to ponder, and like you said, one that could potentially save your organization significant money and stress. We really hope this deep dive has given you the tools and the knowledge to not just identify, but to actively fix those gaps in your SAM process. Keep learning, keep growing, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.